Hola, welcome to beautiful Cancun. My name is Mark. I'm a New Zealander living here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico. I'm a big rugby fan and I started this channel just 8 weeks ago to bring you all the amazing rugby stories and news from across the world. And of course, I'm going to be with you all the way through the Rugby World Cup and beyond as I grow this channel. So if you're somebody that wants a very unbiased, fair, honest and transparent opinion and commentary about rugby from across the world, then hit that subscribe button because I'm the guy for you. I might be a huge All Black fan, but I'm going to make sure that I retain my integrity and give you the most unbiased opinion that I can about rugby games that we all love and see across the world. Now let's get into today's video because I'm going to be talking to you about 6 reasons why I think the All Blacks are going to struggle at this year's Rugby World Cup. Now as I go forward on this channel, I'm going to be bringing you more sights and sounds of beautiful Mexico. I'm here in Cancun, and unless you didn't know, it is the #1 tourist destination in Mexico. Last year there was 12.5 million people decided to come here for a holiday. 400,000 visitors a day come and visit this spectacular part of Mexico. So if you haven't been here, I highly suggest and recommend to come here at some stage. Put it on your bucket list. It's a beautiful place to hang out. The Mexican people are absolutely fantastic, and of course the food is spectacular as well. So I'm going to be trying to bring you more sights and sounds from around Cancun as I make my rugby videos. I don't have a car, or I don't own a car, so I'm going to get around the best I can to show you all the magnificent places here and some of the things that you can do if you come here on a vacation. Now let's get into talking about some rugby. Now I'm a Kiwi and I want to talk about the All Blacks because a lot of people think they're going to bounce back and they're going to do extremely well at this year's Rugby World Cup, and they may well do that. But I've got some major concerns, and I want to put my hand on my heart this morning and I want to tell you what those concerns are. And there's 6 of them that I have before the All Blacks kick off their first game against France next Friday in the Stade de France in Paris. So the first thing I want to talk about is the All Blacks discipline. And as you can see, over the last 10 years, the All Blacks have received over 50% more yellow cards than their opposition. And I think this is going to be an issue during the Rugby World Cup. And this discipline issue has come about because of the pressure that teams are starting to put on against the All Blacks. And the All Blacks are infringing more and more in the breakdown situation, and they're getting caught out with these yellow cards. So going into this year's Rugby World Cup, I think this is going to be a big issue for the All Blacks, and they're going to have to really watch their discipline. Now I've done some further analysis on this, and if you have a look, let's have a look at the situation when it comes to red cards. The All Blacks have now received a red card every year for the past 6 years. And over the last 10 years, New Zealand has received 6 red cards and opposition teams 4 red cards, including Bismarck du Plessis 2 yellows in 2013 that turned into a red card. In 7 of the 8 of those games, 88% of them, if a team gets a red card, they lose the game. The exception being when the All Blacks beat Australia 38-21 on September the 5th, 2021. In the All Blacks versus Australia game on November the 7th, 2020, Australia also got a red card after New Zealand. Alpha Tungafasi was red carded in the 23rd minute, and then Lachlan Swinton was red carded in the 35th minute. Australia won that game though, 24 points to 22. So with a track record of getting more cards than their opponents, you can see that red cards or potential red cards in this year's Rugby World Cup could be a major problem for the All Blacks. Now let's have a look at the yellow card situation over the last 10 years with the All Blacks. Have a look at the yellow card situation for the All Blacks over the last 10 years, and as you can see, they've got 54% more yellow cards than their opponents, 61 versus 39 from their opponents. And Kieran Reid holds the record, if you like, with 5 yellow cards. and 6 All Blacks have received 3 cards or over in this time. I've also missed out Scott Barrett on that list as well, but you can see the others that have received yellow cards. So a big issue for the All Blacks getting yellow cards. Now, further into the analysis that I've done, let's have a look at the impact of getting total cards in these games for the All Blacks over the last 10 years. So 55% of the games they've had at least 1 card, which is 72 cards out of 130 games. The All Blacks get a card every 2 games. The All Blacks opponents get a card every 3 games. There's been 4 games with 4 cards, and the list goes on there. You can see some of the outcomes that have happened when the All Blacks have got those particular cards. Now, what I've done is I've looked at some of the other teams around the world and seen how their discipline stacks up compared to that of the All Blacks over the same period of time. So let's have a look at those right now. So first off, let's have a look at Ireland, and in 11 matches versus Ireland over this period, the All Blacks received 10 cards, 1 red and 9 yellows, versus Ireland's only 2 yellows. In the last 8 games, the ratio is 9 versus 1, and the teams have split the games with 4 wins each. In Australia's case, the most cards the All Blacks have had over this period is 18 versus Australia. The teams have played 30 times in the last 10 years. The All Blacks getting 3 red cards out of the 5 total and 15 yellow cards. Australia's received 1 red card and 10 yellow cards in that time. Then having a look at Scotland. In the last 3 games versus Scotland, New Zealand has got 3 yellow cards and Scotland has got none. In Wales, in the last 8 games versus Wales, New Zealand has got 4 yellow cards and Wales have got none. Against France, the All Blacks' best discipline against a top tier team is against France, with 3 yellow cards in the last 11 games, compared to France's 1 red card and 4 yellow cards. And against Italy, there's been no cards for either team in the last 4 games that New Zealand has played against Italy. So New Zealand are prone to getting cards, and again, I think this discipline issue in the Rugby World Cup starting next Friday is going to be a big issue. And as we know, the referees are cracking down on these latest laws, particularly around the tackle situation. So the All Blacks, if they happen to pick up yellows and reds, they could be in a lot of trouble based on those statistics I've just shown you over the last 10 years. So that's the first area where I think the All Blacks are going to struggle in this year's Rugby World Cup. Now moving on to the next point I want to make, and that's around their Nemesis teams. The All Blacks have got some Nemesis teams that they find it difficult to play against. And here they are, 3 of them in my mind. And they're the old foe, the Springboks, Ireland and France. And we all know what France has done to the All Blacks in Rugby World Cups before, and even in New Zealand they ran them very close in that final, and of course we know what happened in the semi-final in France as well. And then of course the Springboks, and we know what they've just done to the All Blacks at Twickenham. So if they do meet each other in a quarter-final match, then the odds-on chances are that South Africa is going to be very, very up for that game and believing that they can beat the All Blacks. And then of course we've got Ireland, the first team to beat the All Blacks in a series down under in New Zealand, and that was a monumental occasion for World Rugby, was seeing the All Blacks beaten in a series at home, and that Irish team will be buoyed knowing that they have that victory in the bag. So I think the second point that I wanted to make today was around those teams that appear to be the nemesis of All Black rugby, and the All Blacks could struggle against those particular teams. And then the third point I want to make in terms of the areas where I think the All Blacks are going to struggle is really leading on from those nemesis teams, and that's the area of invincibility. When I was growing up as a kid, we expected the All Blacks to win every game, and they nearly did. But since that Irish series win in New Zealand, we've seen the belief now in other teams that the All Blacks are no longer invincible. And a lot of teams are now going in with the mindset that they perhaps didn't have a number of years ago. when they ran out against the All Blacks, thinking the All Blacks were going to beat them. But now I think there's a very strong belief between the top tier nations that they can beat the All Blacks on any given day. And I think that whole air of invincibility is gone that other teams have picked up on. So I think that's going to be another factor in this year's Rugby World Cup, is the All Blacks are not going to have that status of invincibility that they once used to have. So the fourth point I want to make in terms of why I think the All Blacks are going to struggle in this year's Rugby World Cup is because it's not being played in New Zealand. It's being played away from home on neutral grounds, and that's where New Zealand always struggles as well when it comes to Rugby World Cup. And I've got this chart together here to show you where the All Blacks are struggling away from home. And as you can see, it was only the win in England where they actually won the Rugby World Cup. The rest of the games have been at home, down under. So again, now being in France this time, we know the All Blacks can have some challenges there, and I think that's going to bring them back to the pack as well. So expect the fact that this Rugby World Cup is being played in France to be something that's going to make it even that much more difficult for the All Blacks to get to the finish line in this year. Now my fifth point in terms of why I think the All Blacks may struggle in this year's Rugby World Cup is around the depth of the squad. And I've read a lot of the comments that people have written, not only on my channel but on other channels and in the press over the last few weeks, talking about how strong they believe this rugby squad is from New Zealand and how deep they go in a number of positions. Well, I also look at the frailty of some of the positions in this particular team. We know that Brodie Retallick is going to the World Cup with an injury. It is something that definitely could rear its head again once he gets on the field of play. So there's no assurances around that, and I think that locking combination is going to be so important for the All Blacks in these key games. And it may be a blessing that he's not playing, or he probably won't play in that first game against France next week. So I think the question mark over Brodie Retallick is going to be something important for the All Blacks in this year's Rugby World Cup. The other one is Aaron Smith. I think the All Blacks have a potential weakness at halfback if Aaron Smith gets injured for any reason and can't play in the big games. I think that in Cam Roigard, the All Blacks have a good halfback coming up, but he definitely hasn't got the experience that Aaron Smith has in these big international competitions. And I think if anything were to happen to Aaron Smith, the All Blacks are going to be in trouble. He's a very, very key component to this All Blacks side. He makes sure the game management of the All Blacks game plan is handled from halfback by managing the forwards and getting his backs away as well. And without him there, we've already seen when he was taken off and he didn't start a game, how the All Blacks struggled. And I think Aaron Smith is going to be a very important component of this All Black team. Along with Richie Mo'unga, I think he's really consolidated himself now at number 10, playing extremely good rugby there for both the Crusaders and for the All Blacks. His kicking is on point, he's got a high percentage of goal kicking, and I think if he was taken out through injury, then the All Blacks would suffer again. Of course, Beauden Barrett can slip in there, but that means a number of changes in the back line for the All Blacks. So I think there are some key weaknesses. We've also got Shannon Frizzell going in with a hamstring injury. We don't know how bad that is. We don't know if it's going to show itself again in the games that he starts to play. So I think that's another potential weakness in the squad. And when I look at some of the other squads, particularly France and Ireland and the Springboks, I think they've got a bigger depth of squad across all positions more than what the All Blacks have. So I'm not saying the All Blacks is a weak team. What I'm saying is that I think their depth of squad doesn't match some of those other top teams in this year's Rugby World Cup. Let me know what you think about this. And as the beautiful sun comes up behind me in Cancun here this morning, I just want to talk about the last point that I want to make in terms of what I think might be an issue for the All Blacks in this year's Rugby World Cup, and that's around leadership. If you look at France with Antoine Dupont and you look at South Africa with Siya Kolisi, you have two absolute superstars of the game, men that have real colossal presence within their team and within the world of rugby. And the All Blacks, I believe, have been missing that since Richie McCaw retired. And while Sam Cane, I've got a lot of time for him, I don't think he's of that level of leadership that people like Khaleesi and also Antoine Dupont bring to the French team. So I think the leadership question is very important for the All Blacks. We've seen it when they were under pressure against the Springboks. We've seen it in the other games too, when they were under some pressure from Australia and Argentina in the Rugby Championship at different times of those games. And I don't think the leadership is at the level that it used to be for the New Zealand All Blacks. However, I think Ardie Savea is a wonderful human being and a wonderful rugby player and a wonderful leader. And we saw in Savea in that Melbourne Test match in the Rugby Championship between New Zealand and Australia, Savea really stand up and lead that team. And I think he's somebody that comes from that mould of a Richie McCaw. He's got that presence within the team. He's got that humbleness as well, and leads by example. And if you listen to any All Black game and the commentary that's given by any commentators, you'll hear Ardie Savea's name mentioned more than you will Sam Cane or most of the other players, and that's because Ardie Savea brings a presence. I would love to see Ardie Savea the captain of the All Blacks. I think he is the kind of leader that the All Blacks need going forward, and I wouldn't be surprised we see that in the future as Razor Robertson comes in to lead this All Black team as the head coach. But for now, I think that's one of the things that the All Blacks are going to miss in this Rugby World Cup. Their leadership at crucial times when they're under pressure, and they need somebody to stand up in addition to the senior members of the team to really show them the way. And I think Springboks and Khaleesi and France and Antoine Dupont, particularly as two teams, have got that style of leadership. And regardless of the fact that I am an All Black supporter, I do see these potential weaknesses in the All Blacks in this year's Rugby World Cup. And again, I say that a lot of you have said don't write the All Blacks off, they'll come back strong after that Springbok win. I think there's some shakiness in this All Black squad, and I think they're centered around those things that I've talked about today. The discipline, the Nemesis teams that they're going to face, leadership and true leadership style and potential. Being away from New Zealand and playing on neutral grounds, I think that's something that's going to impact them for sure. And I think the depth of their squad is going to, at some stage during this tournament, become a problem for the All Blacks. So I'm really interested to hear what you think. Tell me first, what do you think of this beautiful Cancun environment that I'm living in, but also tell me what you think about these 6 issues that I've raised. Maybe you agree with 1 or 2, maybe you don't agree with any of them. I'd love to hear your comments below, so let me know. I'm going to pride myself on being unbiased throughout the Rugby World Cup. Yes, I'm a big All Black fan, but rugby is my passion and rugby comes first. So I want to see the best rugby team win this tournament. Doesn't matter what nation it is, as long as we have fantastic rugby. And at the end of the day, if the sport of rugby is the winner, then I'm going to be a happy man. If the All Blacks are holding that trophy at the end, of course I'm going to be even more happier. But I think it's important that we keep the respect for all rugby nations. There's going to be a lot of things that happen throughout this Rugby World Cup that probably upsets you and I as fans, but as long as we remain respectful and understand it's all about the game, then I think we can all be winners in the end. So there we go. As the sun comes up, I'm going to leave you from this beautiful beach in Cancun. I hope you enjoyed the show today. If you did, give me a thumbs up and a like, and don't forget to hit that little subscribe button. I'm going to be back again really soon with another video as we head into the last 7 days before this year's Rugby World Cup kicks off in the Stade de France. So until then, stay safe, stay well everyone, and keep enjoying your rugby. Bye for now.